In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this sign. When searching for beeswax for various food-safe finishes, I met a local beekeeper who happened to need a custom sign made. It's a fairly straightforward project, and it's a great one for any newer woodworkers. You'll need a couple of tools, the first being a saw. Pretty much any type of saw will do. If your board is already the right size, you don't even need a saw at all. Next is a router, which will give you both the plunge cuts on the interior of the sign and then also clean up the edge. So you'll need a straight bit and then also some kind of edging bit for the outside. And then lastly, you'll need a sander. Almost any type of sander will do. Although if you happen to have a drum sander or a thickness planer, that'll save you a lot of time, but it's not necessary. Lastly, materials needed are carbon paper, paint, and some finish. Okay, so let's get started here. First, after printing out my template and cutting it up, getting it put back together how I want it, and placing it on my board, I taped it to the top half so that underneath I could slip in a piece of carbon paper. It's less common today than it used to be in woodworking, but certainly if your grandfather was going to transfer a template onto a piece of wood, this is what he would be using. Main difference, he probably wouldn't be shelling out extra money to get the Martha Stewart branded carbon paper like I did. So hey, Martha, next time you're featuring woodworkers on your show, that means pick me. Then I went over everything with a darker mark, made sure to add some lines on the inside so that I would not get lost when I'm using the router. Once I got out to the garage, I realized I had a dilemma. Did I clean off this bench or this one over here? Shortly after, I was able to get it moved off, clamp everything down, and begin cutting off my sign. Next, it was a matter of setting up the router with a plunge bit on the plunging base and aligning the depth to be adequate for the sign. The key to making a sign like this is you want the depth of the cut to be shallower than the depth of the board. After you've got the depth of the router exactly where you want it, just go ahead and clamp down your workpiece and start hogging out all of the material that's, of course, inside the lines. Stay in the lines. Just get it out of there. I'm using a spiral upcut bit. It removes material pretty quick, although it does leave a burr along the edge that I'll have to come and clean up later, as well as, if you slow down or stay in a specific spot, it has kind of a tendency to burn on this maple. Paint is going inside of the recess there, so it's not an issue for my specific project. I then switched over to a smaller, straight flush cut bit, which allowed me to really go in and get the details of the dripping honey. Quickly sanded over part of the edges to just make sure everything was looking good, and realized, hey, you have to cross all your T's and dot all your I's, so I did exactly that. Here you can see what a cleaner cut this other one makes. However, of course, the paint is going in next. Speaking of the paint, here it is. When the paint was drying, I realized, well, shoot, I actually do have to go back to that other workbench that I was talking about and clean it off. That's where I had my under-the-table router mount that I needed to install. Took a little bit of figuring to line up my holes and figure out what the right screws were. And then I had to run over to the hardware store to actually get those exact screws. It was kind of a time crunch because they closed, in 15 minutes or so. With my roundover bit in place, I was able to make a test cut and continue on. The paint was dry, so I could take this to the table saw and square up the edges, get those cleaned up, and bring it to the router table to round over my edges. Now it was time to start sanding the piece. There's two kind of cool things that happened with it. First, obviously you could see what the sign is actually going to look like when it is closer to completion. And secondly, you could actually see the bandsaw marks from when this board was milled up, which were pretty much hidden away beforehand. So that's pretty neat that they show up at this point. However, you still have to do a lot of sanding to get down to the low points and take off all of the unwanted paint. So we just finished up the sign, put a little bit of polyurethane on it. Now we're going to go ahead and deliver it. The sign was delivered and she absolutely loved it. So I'm now the proud owner of 15 pounds of raw natural beeswax. If you want to see what I'll do with it, go ahead and click on this honey dipper right here. And if you want to see more of my projects, click on this subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Hey, thanks for watching. My name is Todd from Wood Frontier. Okay, that's footage for the daydream sequence.